I got called into work today on my day off, so I moved my presentation to week 6, I think.
Okay.
Did you tell them that's not allowed, Chuck?
I try, but they don't really listen to me.
I don't get that, do you?
Oh, you guys.
Hey.
Hello.
Hello.
Just FYI, I'm recording on my desktop, so as soon as we get Jan here, we should be good to go.
Okay.
Just taking roll real quick.
Make sure you count me.
Yeah.
I don't want to interrupt the meeting too much, so if at the first you've got some questions I can help you with, I'd like to do that and get out of the way so that you can take care of your usual business.
Okay. Anybody have any questions?
I don't at this point.
I know some of you have already turned in some code topics, so I appreciate that. But I do recognize that. So if you're still working on that, don't feel like you have to wait until it's all perfect.
I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the professionalism. I know you've, put it out like in an email, but how do we get that evaluated again, the professionalism part of it?
$20 gets you a lot better.
Are you recording this yet?
Yeah.
That on tape, right?
No.
Professionalism has several areas to it. One is interaction with the instructor, and I judge that a lot. Well, if you interact, if you have questions for me, then obviously that counts. But also, if you're turning your work in, and I make a suggestion to you that, okay, your local storage really was a pretty basic example. You didn't try and do too much to it. Add a JSON object to your local storage. Mm-hmm. And then if you follow up a couple of weeks later and say, all right, Brother James, I got this ready. You said that I was weak in this area. I've worked on and I've addressed that. So that will go towards that aspect of professionalism. Another part is, are you working on stuff and getting things turned in? Last semester will go down in history as my class with the biggest number of procrastinators I've ever seen. And if you did that in your job, that's not very professional. So that's why I shouldn't badger you, because that's not professional. I want you to be self-motivated and turn things in, but what I'm trying to get you into a habit of is reporting to your boss and letting her know what you're working on. And then if you are interacting with your teammates, if somebody has some questions and doesn't know how to do CSS animations and you take some time to assist them with that, sometimes you have to bring that specifically to my attention, because I don't listen to every single minute of your team meetings. So you may say, on Thursday the 26th, there was a question on CSS, and I showed some code that kind of turned the light bulb on for some people. So help me out, show me where you've been assisted people, and you may say, during the week there were some questions on DOM, and I helped them out with that.
Okay, thank you.
Perfect.
Does anybody have any questions as to where we submit our topics or our code?
I haven't done that yet. Where is that? Where do you do that? I can look it up, but.
So if you look in the on the main page for our class, there's an assignments tab,
Okay,
And
that's where it's
inside
at.
there, you'll find the code, the professionalism in both the scheduling as well as our demeanor. And you want to submit just some dummy files in there if you haven't submitted anything already, so that he can add topics or add scores to it as he sees us exhibit those behaviors.
So when we submit our first presentation, and that will suffice for that also, correct? You won't need to do any dummy, or do you prefer dummy documents first?
No, all you have to do is put something in there.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then it turns that on, because sometimes I'll be listening to a team meeting and I'll think, oh, that was just great. I really see how they tried to communicate this topic that's kind of difficult. And if there's some good professional behavior, I would like to hop over to the grade book right then and put a note in there and do something to the grade, because my memory doesn't last very long, and it's just nice if I can. And Boy Scouts, you're supposed to reward the boys when you find them doing something right.
Yeah.
And so I kind of like to, if I see something good going on, I like to put a note in there, and then that helps me so I can give you the grade that you deserve.
Good.
Well, any other questions? Otherwise, we can let Gary go and we can get going.
All right. Well, I will hang around. I'm going to mute my microphone, and I will listen in a little bit.
Okay.
And what team number are you guys?
This is team
4.
3 or 4. I'm sorry, I missed out.
No,
I combined my other classes.
yeah, that's what I'm doing.
Which team are you? 4?
4.
4. Okay. All right. I am going radio silent, but I'll eavesdrop for a little while.
Okay.
All right.
Thanks.
Good luck, you guys. Send an email if you have any other questions.
Okay. So tonight, our presentations, Chuck is going to be moving on to next week, as he had some upcoming work issues. So, or not next week, week 6. So the only 3 that we.
But I am presenting next week as well.
Oh, okay. Well, tonight's topic was moving to week 6, wasn't it?
Correct. Yes.
Okay. And then, so we'll just start with Jan on loops, conditional statements, functions, variables, and blah, blah, blah.
And blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, blah, blah, blah. That's a technical term.
Okay, let me share my screen. Everybody see that?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. So we're covering loops, variables, statements, arrays, and blah, blah, blah. Okay. Loops we discussed last week with Olan. Some of the ones we do is for and do whiles. And the while loops, these are actually the examples that Olan gave us last week. These are also standard loops. There are also for and else loops, where if the condition isn't met in for, it goes down to else and completes the task that's there. We also have nested loops. Loops can be nested inside each other when some tasks needed to be accomplished before the task, before it completes. What I did here is I color-coded the loops. So it would come down to the first one and do that counter or whatever happens to be there. Then go down to the next one and complete that one, and complete the third one. It would keep going around. Like in this particular case, it would keep going until it reaches 100. Then it go back up to the second one, goes, go to 2, come back and go to 100, and keep going around and around and around until all of the conditions have been met. Exiting a loop, we use break. The break command exits a loop. It can only be used to exit loops, and it cannot be used to exit conditional statements. So in our example, we would list everything, and then when it meets the condition, whoops, hang on, no. How do I go back? There we go. When it reaches the condition, it would break out. Continue is also used to interrupt the counter. If it meets a condition, it will stop and go back to, it will not complete the statement that's followed, but will go up to the next iteration of the counter. We have different variables we've discussed last week with coding. Those that are declared at the beginning of the program are global and will work throughout the entire program. Those declared within functions are limited to the function. Once the function is over, that variable is also over. Most common types are numericals, strings, and booleans. Some other ones are undefined, where a data type is declared but never assigned a value. Null, where is declared and intentionally not assigned a value. For example, we would list it as variable jump equals null. There's also an object variable where the variable defined takes on the properties of the object or function that is assigned to it, such as the text equals the function. Conditional statements, code typically appears in loop forms, such as greater than, less than, equal to, assigned, add 1, subtract 1, not, and so forth. Other conditions that are commonly used are or and and. For example, in first example, if x is less than 20 or greater than 40, whatever statements follow that would be executed. Otherwise, it will continue on. Likewise, in the following one, if y is 15 and the name that is given equals John, then the following code would also be executed. Arrays, as Olan had mentioned, an array is a group of data assigned to a variable. Typically, it's a single-dimensional array with only one list of items. Arrays are identified by the brackets around the data. For example, colors would be red, black, yellow, blue, green, etc. Same thing with cars or grades. The element location in an array begins with 0. So color 0 would return red. Likewise, grade 3, which would actually be the 4th number, would return 100. Nested arrays or multi-dimensional arrays follow the same patterns but inside each other. The pattern would have the same brackets around each set of arrays. For example, dreamers, you have name and then another array inside that for Cobb, Arthur, and Smith. In the array dreamers, name is at dreamers 0, but Arthur is at the position of dreamers 0 and 1. Does that make sense? No comment. Okay.
1 or would it be at 1, 1?
No, it's 0, 1.
Okay.
Because it's alongside the first, it's coinciding with the very first element in the first part of the array. So it's like I could put name and then you have Cobb, Arthur, and Smith. Then I can put another one there that would say address and another set of arrays next to it, which would, add address would then become dreamers 1, and then whatever number you have in that would continue in the second one. The example it gave could really get complicated. They had 7 arrays nested inside each other. Adding to and reading from an array, data can be added to and manipulated by various methods. Each has a unique effect on the array. All of them are declared by the array name, followed by a dot in the method name. So if you do pop, it'll remove the last element from an array. Push adds an element to the end of the array. For example, if I did array.push feed, it puts the feed at the bottom. So we now have pay, write, walk, and feed. Reverse reverses the order of the elements. So it starts out with pay, write, and walk, and it ends with walk, write, and pay. Shift moves the first element, removes the first element, and returns it. So if you were to do array shift, it would return pay, and then the array just consists of write and walk. Sort alphabetizes the elements of the array, so they appear in alphabetical order. Splice lets you simultaneously add and remove elements in the array. The format for this would be array.splice, and in the parentheses, the first one is the index number where you want to start. The second is how many elements are involved. And then in brackets, you're going to list however many elements you're adding or replacing in that position. So for example, if I did an index 1, where did I do it? Down here. Array splice 0, 1, watch. In replacing the one above it would replace the element feed with watch. So it would then become watch, pay, walk, and write. Unshift adds elements to the beginning of an array and returns a new length. So if I put length equals array unshift dishes and laundry and then called the variable length, the array would now consist of dishes, laundry, feed, pay, walk, and write, and the length would be 6. Am I making sense?
Yeah.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Okay. Reading from the array is actually pretty simple. You simply identify the index that you're looking for. For example, console.log array number 3 would print the word pay to the screen. If you want to list out the array, a simple for loop works quite well, because then each time the I goes up, it goes and prints out the next element in the array. Functions. Olav gave us a great introduction to functions. A few things to remember. Scope, the variables declared inside the function remain inside the function. In our example, we have the variable hello, which is also declared in the hi function, but hi can't access it because the hello is in the closing brace of the variable. To fix that, you simply move the brace down to below alert hello. Nested functions, any function declared within another function automatically has access to variables declared within its parent function. So we have a function called full name where the first name is declared as Hugo, and then we start another function called alert full name that declares the last name variable as Reyes, but the alert has access to the first name as well as the last name, and it will print out Hugo Reyes when it's called. Arguments. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Does the would you have access to a variable outside of the parent?
I'm sorry, say it again.
If you had a nested variable inside the parent, would you have access? I know the globals you probably do, but I'm just trying to understand that.
Yeah. What happens, the nested function has access to the variables in the parent function. Okay, so
right.
Alert is in the alert full name function, but the actual variable first name is in the first name function, is in its parent function.
So in this instance,
okay.
If you had another function outside of it named example, it wouldn't have access to the variable first name or last name, but it would have access to the global variables.
Right.
Correct. That's what I just wanted to verify that. Yep.
Arguments or variables can be defined in a function the same way you pass data into a function. So we can list function, person, and then the variables that we want to identify. The other this declares the variables first name, last name, and age. To pass info into that function can also be done elsewhere by listing person, which is the function, and then the data that we want to put into those variables. That's a lot like Java. I found all of this information in the Jumpstart JavaScript that's available on SitePoint. It's a free download. You can also find it on the W3 Schools website. Any questions?
Not at this time. Anybody else?
No, I think it was a good explanation.
That's all I have.
Awesome. Thank you.
Good job, Dan.
Mark, are you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Okay.
Let's see.
There should be 3 ellipses on the top right of the screen. You can click on that and there'll be share screen.
The
There you go. I see it.
Well, it's interesting. I can't see it, but you can see it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can see it.
I've never screen shared with something like this. Let me do something really quick. Can you still see it?
Yep.
Yep.
Okay. I figured it would show up in the window of the you know, the Google thing there, but I guess not. All right, so my topic tonight is DOM manipulation. I have no idea why I chose this subject first, because as I started looking at this more and more, it's a huge subject. And I don't know if anybody's ever, you know, really started studying DOM yet, but many of you may have, but this is the first exposure I've had to it.
Yeah, I just started today looking into it, and there's a lot to...
Oh my gosh. I mean, I've been looking at it. Well, I had training all last week, and so in between when I was doing that, I'd be looking at this.
Yeah.
And so basically, you know, DOM is, it's really, and I'm not going to pretend to know everything about this because it really is a huge subject, and trying to get your arms around it was a little bit difficult for me. But, you know, I started to grasp, you know, pieces of it here and there. And I think that as you start to, you know, learn more about it and start to play with all the different functionality of it, you begin to understand the structure of your web pages and things of that nature. And so it really, to kind of kick that off, I just created, this is, I think, Olin, I'm kind of like you. I started this website just as a basic. And I'm going to keep adding to it as I study the subjects and try to improve it more and more as it goes. And so this is at its raw level right at the moment. But this is, I'm going to talk about DOM as a web page first, and hopefully this will make sense a little bit. I took this out of Rach's book because I was looking at it and I saw this diagram because I just didn't quite understand where everything fit. And, you know, when you get into DOM, you start hearing and talking about, you know, you hear comments of the parent, the child, the, you know, siblings or the descendants and all those type of things, and I didn't get it. And finally I saw this diagram, and then it started to make sense. And so as you look at your code, it's really much like a genealogy, you know, structure. It really is. If you look at HTML, that's your root. And it's also a parent. And so in every given generation, there's a parent to child, et cetera, correct? And so that's really how this is structured. If you look at forms, for instance, that is the parent to label, input, and span. And so when the people, or when you start reading and you hear, you know, it's a child of form, then you know that it's below form somewhere on one of its things. And also these three combined with form are the siblings of that family. So that just kind of helps you understand the structure a little bit, and it coordinates with our code up here. So you have the HTML, which is the parent, and then you have the head, which is one of the children of the parent in the body, and so forth. And then as it breaks down, you start seeing the children and the siblings and how that all comes together and forms. I think DOM is somewhat natural to the way we think if we're logical in any means, and we are because we're in this degree, and so we have some sort of logic to it, and it makes sense. But that kind of helped me, so I wanted to take a picture of that and put it on here to kind of show that, you know, the structure of DOM in particular. If I go to the home page for myself, there's some resources that I think will help us understand. In DOM, there's a lot of nodes and objects that are utilized quite a bit. And who is it that said they started looking at it?
That was me.
Is that Chuck? I don't see who's.
Yeah. So it's me, Dan. Dan's Chuck. Sorry to be confusing. My email address says Chuck, but my name's Dan.
If you start looking at this, it gets quite interesting. And so what I was going to do is put all these different things in there. I thought, no, I'll just create a link to each of these. So I found this website. It's a java2s.com. And what was nice, and you can go to W3 and all those because they have somewhat similar, but I kind of like the layout of the way they did this. And so if you look at, these are the DOM nodes and functions. So if you look at this is specifically the document objects that is used in DOM. So everything, I mean, as you look at that slowly, I'm just going to scroll it. You can see the amount of
holy crap
things that you can use in DOM. And so we're going to go over each one of these, folks, tonight. I'm just kidding. I'm not going to.
I'm going to leave it recording. I'm going to walk away.
while I'm talking, right?
Yep.
And so, you know, if we go to each one of these, now the attributes, they're a little bit shorter. So, you know, they have, but there are some attributes, the names, values, and so forth. I thought it was interesting, and this will all go on my remote site so you can access it, but these are the elements, and the elements are pretty vast in particular also. You look at the various elements. So when I said, why did I take on this, the very first thing, I don't know, but there is a lot to learn
You didn't know what you were in for.
What's that?
I didn't know what you were in for.
Yeah, we do know. And those are some of the elements that you see, and we'll be talking about a couple of those tonight. And then the last one, which is quite interesting on the resource side of it, is the styles. And this is a lot to do with the CSS and so forth, but you know, you have some of these, but this just goes on and on. If you go down to, here's where they start. And this really, as you scroll through the various backgrounds, the borders, the, you know, the pages and the columns and all that, it's just a vast amount. And so what DOM really does, it helps you structure your pages, you know, in a way that the browser can actually, it's built in and understands it well. And some of these, if you notice on this side over here, some of these styles are designed in CSS3, and some of them are originals as CSS, you know, on the one. So it kind of tells you which ones are getting older, and some of those might go out of date, but basically these are the resources, are some of the resources. Now there's a lot of resources online, you know, that I found, you know, that you can look at this, and if you type in DOM, you're going to continue to get more and more, but it's a huge, huge subject. And so anyways, I thought it would probably be good just to go into, I'm just going to do the ones that we talk, you know, that were designed in the structure of our, you know, studies, because like I said, I could go, you saw the list of them, there's just too many to really tackle. And so this one here, these are some of the examples. If I were to go to like append, or the element appendChild, this is kind of a fun little one. It's something where as you look at your documents, you need to sometimes be able to append text to a specific node or to a specific element, and you know, being able to do that. So if I click on text, for instance, you're sending text, but if I click it again, it's going to append on and do that again. Nice, you know, it goes there, but I can have it go in different directions too, so it can append different variations. If I go to text, go to right, you know, it continues to go on. And so it's just a simple element that allows you to append whatever you need to a specific, to, you know, whatever you're trying to accomplish. if you go into the code on this, let's go to the code. You're going to see it's pretty simple, you know, the way it's set up. And these are the three script files, or the three JavaScript files where those are at. So you're setting up a button for each one of those. And that's being called, you know, the my text is being called right here. It sets the, it creates the element of P. And then from there, it sets up the text node for just text. And then it appends that, you know, it appends it to these so that it can actually apply it up, you know, where you saw it move and so forth, and apply it to that. And so it's pretty simple text. There's not a lot to it, right?
Hey, Mark,
Yeah.
where it says document P, is that for paragraph?
It's just the element itself. It doesn't, I don't think it stands for anything in particular. I played around with these, and you know, you can interchange them with different things.
Yeah, P is used for text within HTML.
Right.
So just like as you see down below, he's got a create element of button.
Right there.
And another create element of input. It's just the HTML element that you're wanting to create. And there's a long list of different elements you can create.
Okay.
Right. And I mean, I changed these up where I put something else in them, and I can do that, but I'd have to run my code on the other side and show you. But, you know, I played around with putting different things in each of these, and it didn't seem to change or vary it much. So it really depends on, I think what you're creating is much like a variable B, you know, that it creates the element button, and then from there, you know, it sets it up.
Yeah.
So it's a simple little element, but it's pretty powerful, as you can see, on what you want to accomplish.
You can
If I go to
add different flags to them. Like, let's say if you had an image, you can add the attribute, the alternate. You can do a lot of other stuff with it. So
yeah, I mean,
element.
you could put the image up there. So, and these are going to be, I mean, I could, like I said, I spent a lot of time just playing around with each one of these just for fun. But, you know, setting them up and putting them up there, I think with all the other elements combined, you can interchange these, and you're going to see that. Let's go to this one right here, for instance. This one right here is a create element, but what it did was it dynamically put text above this particular one right here. So if I look at the code on this, and I can insert stuff above it too, more above it. But if I look at the code on this, let's see, where is it? There you go. Right here, you're applying several different elements within the code itself on this script file. So if you look at it, you're creating the element of div. So up here, you're setting text is going to be above that, so it displays that. And then you're setting the button in place, you know, insert the text above. I did that after the fact. That was just kind of playing around with that. But right here, it looks at the element, and then it sets up the variables, new dev, and then it looks at that and it says, I'm going to now give it some text, you know, apply that text to this particular element of div. And then I'm going to append that, you know, to the whole thing. And so now it goes down and it looks at it and says, I'm going to place this before, just insert before. I'm going to place that right before that div 1, and that's why it puts it above it. So it's combining different elements, and you can get creative, I believe. And I haven't, like, that's what I was talking about earlier. This is such a vast subject that there's no way you can play with it enough to try to teach it in a manner that I think it's just a matter of trying things in different areas. You know, trying different elements and document nodes and different things of that nature. So that's one there. The other one that was kind of fun is removeChild. It's pretty simple. You can have things on this in your documents, but you can also just quickly remove them. You know, and so that's another element that's there available. replaceChild. If I want to replace an object that's in there, you know, you can do that pretty easily. And I think we did that in one of the other classes where we started replacing things and doing, you know, it's pretty simple stuff to do. But like I said, it's there. The insert before, we did that earlier. So you can continue to insert. And then document write. I wrote that, it works, you're seeing it. That's basically document write. It's really setting up, I'm going to go into the code on this one though, because there's a small piece in here that I think is important. Let's go into here. So if you look at document write, one of the things I didn't realize, I mean, yeah, I can set this up and just write things to the screen like that pretty easily. But you can actually, and this is what I didn't know about document write, is you can set these up so that they go horizontal, vertically, and at an angle or anything, how you want to display on the screen. And you do that by setting these pre-tags right here, which allows you to set that. And those pre-tags allow you to get pretty detailed on what you do with that also. So it's really being able to say, you know, like this one's going vertical, these are horizontal. That's what document write does. It allows you to go to pretty much display on your screen what you need to display, you know, in a variety of things. No, not just text, but you can, I'm sure, display almost anything you want to. And I'm not certain, maybe you'll know if this is a feature that's used heavily in trying to really format your screen to do certain things, or, you know, display some really more detailed, cool stuff on the screen. That's for me to find out down the road. I don't know yet. So outside of that, there's not much more I could have gone into a lot of different features and just brought them up one by one. But I think that's, you know, there's too many to do. So I didn't go much beyond that. Any questions on it, or?
No, I don't have any questions.
No, I think that was actually a really good kind of introduction into. So from what reading today, it seemed like it was kind of the organization and how it interacts with like documents and stuff. Is that what it is, or? Yes.
Yeah, because if you look at, let me go back to the diagram here. If you look at the diagram, it's really being able to understand the structure of the way things work, you know, from the browser level.
Mm-hmm.
So DOM is, you know, if you think about the elements that we kind of went through, you're inputting you're creating elements in insertBefore, creating all sorts of stuff. So that's really the structure of it. It's really just a very formable, standardized way of structuring a web page with a lot of elements and nodes available to make that consistent, you know, across the board whenever you're working. And I think I noticed that, Jen, in your presentation, you had some of the elements of the, you know, the get functions and stuff like that. Those are DOM related. So DOM works across the board in HTML, you know, CSS and so forth. And so that's JavaScript is probably that's really where Java can get its power, because of the DOM structure and all the functionality it provides and what you saw in those lists of different features. But it's starting. I mean, I can say I got glimpses of how this really could work, but it's still a lot to learn on it, honestly.
From my goofing around with it today, I was able to build an entire table by just using these DOM statements and giving it IDs and classes and giving it events. When you click on something, it sparks an event. It's basically how you can build an entire website off of just DOM statements. So
yeah, and it's becoming it's understanding those statements and the different elements that are available to you to be able to let your creativeness take over. Because, you know, we always, if you think about when we're coming up through some of the classes we've taken in basic, you know, web page development, you know, the structure of it, we utilize a lot of the old, you know, structures. Like you notice on some of the code that I use a center, you know, feature or function to center the text on my web page there. That's not going to stay very long. It's just as a temporary measure, because that's outdated. You shouldn't be using those, you know. And so DOM takes over in a lot of those areas. And I think, you know, that's where the creativity comes in. So actually, I kind of got excited once I started looking at those and started understanding what I did get glimpses of. And you probably did too, Olin, when you were playing around with some of those features. probably going, oh wow, I didn't know you could even do this.
Yeah.
It's pretty simple. If you go into those and you just pull one up, you can just create a page and just, copy it to a document and then run it in the browser and play with them all day long and get a good feel for what they can do. So, any other questions?
So you don't have to declare anything at the top that you're using it like you do with script or styles. You just code it into the body?
Not really. It just depends on, yeah, you're coding it into the body, but it depends on what you're trying to accomplish within that script file and outside of in the HTML document itself. So for instance, you notice that when we use the buttons, that had to be done prior, right? So I had to set up the buttons in the variables there outside of that script and utilizing those elements. So there's a few things you got to be aware of, but they're pretty common to what we've already started learning, and being able to develop a web page.
Yeah, all of this coding is in the script segment or headers. You can put it within those script brackets so that it understands that these are JavaScript elements.
One of the things that I did do, and you'll notice on here, let's see, down here, I'll just go to remove right here. I tried to set the script files up independent of the HTML document, but what I found was that I had forgotten that you can't pull a remote script file into an HTML document because it runs the script first and then the HTML, and so it would erase it every time, and I'm going, why is it erasing it? I don't get this. And I finally figured out, oh, I've got to keep that script within the HTML document if I want it to run the way I need to, just to demonstrate what we're doing.
Yeah.
And so, typically, the way I remember programming and setting stuff up is you want to do everything modularized so that everything sits in a file. You make one change to a file, and it updates all your pages everywhere.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to figure out how JavaScript does that because I don't know it well enough.
Yeah, you can just use the same script, but instead of you actually coding it in the page, you can give it a link. Let me pull up an example real quick so you guys can see that.
I was able to get it to do it, but it would erase what I wanted to. So I figured out how to bring in something like that. But there's a lot of studying to do on that. I've got to figure that out more because that's the way I like to set things up.
Yeah.
You want me to stop? I'll stop sharing so you can show us, Olin.
Let me find it first. I can send it to you guys afterwards. I don't want to waste everybody's time, especially Tiffany's, because she's got the next presentation.
Okay.
You can go ahead.
Are you ready? Are you ready for me?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. So, mine is not probably going to be very long. Jan and Dan can probably attest to sometimes I spend a lot of time on the computer working on code that is bothering me, that's not working right. And that was kind of what happened here. I didn't get something working that I wanted, and I probably spent way too much time on it. So anyway, here's what I have. Manipulating CSS class properties using JavaScript. And in here, we're going to see I used the document element by ID quite a bit, which is DOM. It took me a little while to figure out if that was okay, like is DOM part of JavaScript, because like I didn't know what DOM was, but here I've used it. I used it in the 160 class and stuff. So that was good to find out today that it's okay to use DOM when you're trying to use JavaScript because they are part of each other. Let's see. So this is a bit, I think this is something I showed last week. And when I got to looking at this today, I think I've already been doing this a little bit. So this was, I think it was one of the boxes that I had moving on the touch screen one. And so right here, we have the box 2.style.left. And that is, I think that may be using DOM. I'm not sure because it doesn't have the document dot, but this is kind of the setup that you use for DOM there. But it's manipulating this right here, the CSS properties within here. That's how you're accessing them, is by grabbing that ID and saying, now we're going to mess with the style. And then right here, the left is saying, okay, what part of the style are we messing with? So that, we do it down here again too. So anyway, once I realized that, I thought, oh, okay, this isn't as unknown to me as I thought it might be. So this is what the statement I use the most. Document.getElement by ID. Put it in there. Then you have the style.property, and then you're going to tell it what you want it to do for the new style. This is another method that can be used. It's getElements by class name. And then you're using the class name ID in there. And style.property similarly. I think that is just about all of my, that is just all of my slides. So my slides are pretty short today. So I have some sources in there, and I'll get this in the folder. But let me go into, so right here, this was one that is messing with the different CSS properties here. And the code for that is actually pretty simple. Let me find the right. This one is set up with a bunch of buttons here. And so on the buttons, we're using that document.getElement by ID. And then style, and we've got background color. And I'm changing it to blue here. The second button, I did a reset button. And if you leave that blank, it's going to change it to whatever you may have it set. Like if you have CSS up here and you have it set, to black or whatever, it's going to change it to whatever the default was before you manipulated it, when you just leave it empty like that. So then you can do that with the width and put in pixels, height. So that was one that I had already kind of done from last week. So in here, none of these are manipulated right now. They are all just straight up how I've got them coded. I have the these right here are all the statements to manipulate them that I have coded commented out right now. But so this is just I think one of the things that struck me most the last couple weeks is how simple the HTML is when you start using these add-ons. I do a website for my mom, and it's not how I want it to be. It's one I've just walked in on and had to deal with who made it before. And it's a WordPress site, so it's really messy. And it has all over in it, it's not CSS3, it's got the style elements in the HTML, and it's just a mess. So looking at this is kind of mind-boggling for me how clean it can be, and yet you can get all kinds of different, I'm actually going to do it in brackets here because sometimes my server seems to lag, so I'm going to do it locally and see if I can show that. Maybe, if I can remember to save it.
Refresh.
I think it's actually that I have the wrong one pulled up here. Okay. There it is. It's this one. So there I have changed the color with it. And that is right here. It's just, you can use a hex code or whatever you want in there. So I'll change the text ones are super easy, and we all do that in Word, right? Where you can change the font and stuff like that. This one's going to put a strike through on the line and then change, save the, change the size also. So it just kind of goes through like that. The divs, most of them are straightforward here. I'm going to change one of them green, and that same one, I am going to make it shorter. So again, I have CSS up at the top, setting these defaults. This one's going to move it in. I'm changing the left position. Instead of 0, which is where it's defaulting at, I'm going to change it to 350, so it's going to move it to the right. This one, we're using transform right here, so it's style.transform. So it's actually kind of a CSS transformation within the JavaScript here, and we're going to rotate it 25 degrees. This was a new one. I hadn't used this one, so it was kind of fun, I thought. So you can just kind of move them all over. I thought that was pretty cool. So then here, this button, I've got it coded 2 different ways. So we'll take a look, and like one way is like 3 lines, and the other is quite a bit more than that. So it's just set up to change colors, toggling colors. And what this is actually doing is it's right up here. So up here in the CSS, right here, we have these 2 classes, the blue and the red, and it says, what are we doing? We're changing the background blue, changing the background red. This is just the format of the button itself. But so those 2 are what we're toggling. So we already have them coded in the CSS. And right here, this is what I have active for it right now. We have a function called toggle the color. And what we're saying here, we're going to give this variable a definition of the get element by ID button 1, btn1, and we're pulling the class list. So each of, wait, I had some notes I was going to read. Each of the elements has a class list property, and when you pull that, you're basically putting into this variable the array that is contained in the class list property, like every class that is tagged onto that that element right there. And so here we're now saying if that class list contains blue, then we're going to remove it. If it doesn't, else we're going to add it. So if it's red, we're going to change it to blue. If it contains blue, we're going to take it off. So if it contains red, we're going to remove the red. Otherwise, we're going to add the red. So that's what it's doing here. It's changing that background color based on that toggle. So that is one way to do it right here. And it's, what is that, like 12 lines of code or something like that? The other way, comment that out, is right here below it. And this is 2 lines within that function. And so this one we're saying to get the ID and go from the top. There is an actual built-in JavaScript function called toggle. Actually, I guess this would be a DOM function, maybe. One of the element ones called toggle here. And so you toggle it, and you're just going to tell it red or blue. And it should do the exact same thing as what we were having the button do before. So it works exactly the same, but it is not using the CSS that is up here already, the classes that are already defined. So I don't know yet, like the why. I'm sure there's a pretty good why you would do it this way over that way. You could change multiple things that way, I guess. I'm not sure how many things you can, if you can do commas and add on here. I just thought it was interesting that there was 2 lines of code versus all of this to do the same thing here. So that's pretty much my examples for today. Nothing too amazing.
I think it's pretty cool stuff.
Yeah, it is.
I like it.
Any questions?
So when would you do the select by ID versus select by class?
Oh yeah, I was going to show that. Let me find that. That one is on. It's in my transition ones that I showed last week. So in here, oh no, I actually changed it. I did this one today. I changed it. So here we're zooming in. I can pause it, I have it set to do an alert if I haven't zoomed all the way out yet. Not really because I want to, but because I want it to be consistent. When I was trying to, if you try to zoom in when it's already zoomed in, it tells you you can't go any farther. So anyway, in this one, the code for that right here, you're using, so this is the zoom start. That's what we've got here. And you're going to use document.getElements by class name. And so that is right here, the div that we're using is using classes, not IDs. I didn't play with it to see whether I could switch that to ID and just use getElement by ID. It was kind of piggybacking on an example I had found today, and I'm not super sure that this is what is meant by manipulating them or not. I don't know if this falls under that example, but when you do that, we've put it into this variable here that we can then use to get the computed style. Right here we have a window, so it's looking through the whole window, get computed style of zoom start, and the computed style is coming from up here in the CSS style tags. It's where it is going to look for that. And then it's going to say get the property value of background size. Okay, well let me go in here and find what the background size is supposed to be. Okay, it's these numbers here. So that's what that one is doing. And again, I didn't play with it to see whether you could use I don't know if you can use get computed style with the getElement by ID or not. It's definitely something to find out. So this whole example uses the class name for it. Again, we're using class list here, like in the other example, and we're looking for if it contains zoom. And if not, we're going to add it. So if it does not, the exclamation, if it does not contain zoom, we're going to add zoom onto it. And that's how it decides if it needs to zoom in or out. So down here it'll be if it does not contain zoom, zoom out. Anyway, I don't know. I kind of had moved on from this one, so I'm not sure if this falls under the CSS properties or not. I think it does because it is going from this background size here to that one. And while we have this coded, it's telling it to switch to use this class property here. So it seems like there's a couple ways you can do it where you can actually tell it within the code here, right here, what to be, like kind of hard code it that way, versus having multiple classes and telling it which one to use on given situations, I guess.
Yeah, I think on the one where you've got right there, where it switches CSS classes, that's an actual DOM manipulation because you're changing the actual DOM attribute of what class it's a part of, where your other one's an actual CSS change where you're changing what the CSS is for the style. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I wasn't super sure on this which I was supposed to focus on because it says to change the class properties, and I mean they both change the class properties, right? On a kind of a bigger level, it's just how are they changing it? Are they, because you can go back, you know, between them. So I don't know what he's looking for more emphasis on.
Because you're changing the class, whether it's DOM or not, it still is part of the CSS. So
yeah, that's kind of what I figured. So and there's a lot you can do with it because like Mark showed us, there's a ton with the DOM, and you can use that to manipulate all of the CSS properties you could ever think of.
Well, and Tiffany, if you think about it, you've been using DOM in many of your presentations to this point.
Yeah.
Well, I know. I had messaged Jan earlier and was like, okay, is DOM part of JavaScript? Is like what is going on here? We've got CSS, JavaScript, DOM. Where do they all come together? And I think when I first started with the presentations and with the topics, in my mind I was really keeping them separate. And this week it was kind of like my brain melted down because it's like, you can't keep these separate, Tiff. This is not going to work to keep them separate, to learn them before you put them together. You just got to dive in. And anyway, I got distracted trying to make a picture move around with the arrow keys, which I don't have working yet. but I'm working on it, like Pac-Man kind of.
Well, they all work together. They blend together quite a bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, DOM is actually part of JavaScript, so.
Yep. Yeah, where I got those from on some of the stuff, like the diagram, that's all a big section within the JavaScript book about DOM.
Yeah, I had come across that, all those long lists that I was like, hey, I saw that today when I was looking at that.
Yep. So, no, I think a lot of this, you got to know it all. HTML, CSS, JavaScript, because it all blends together, PHP.
Yeah. All right, so that's all I have.
Okay, so for those of you guys that are better at coding than I am, when do you know to use DOM, and when do you know to use JavaScript, and when do you know to use just plain old CSS?
Well, I'll tell you what I did. You can make something work pretty easily just on the basic level, but if you want to make it more efficient and less code, you're probably going to want to use some of the DOM elements and documents, because that'll shorten the process of getting something done. And so it's just a matter of learning those features or being aware of them so that you know when to implement them into your code. So like I said, you saw my websites, they're pretty basic. I just barely started it. I mean, I put it together really quick this week, and I thought, well, I'm going to start implementing this CSS like you did, Tiffany.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's going to shape the website, so it's going to get better and better as I present, hopefully. As you learn these features, you go, oh, I could do this with it. Oh, you know what? I got to start all over because I should have implemented this at the very beginning, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So that's what I think is going to happen, Jim.
Yeah. The guiding principle behind the 3 main languages that you use, HTML is for your structure for the page, just to how things are in there. CSS is how you display it or color it or shape it, basically make it look pretty, paint it. And then JavaScript is how you make it interactive with your end user. That's the 3 separate languages you're going to use for a website and why they're used. So they're all 3 needed. It's not like you can say, I'm going to do just CSS for my web page, or I'm going to use just JavaScript for my web page. That you can't. It has to start with HTML, with CSS to color it, and then JavaScript to make it interactive. So they're all 3 part of the same picture.
And then DOM just kind of mixes in with all of them.
DOM is part of JavaScript.
Yeah, well, DOM.
I don't want you guys thinking it is a separate language. It is part of JavaScript, and it's how JavaScript interacts with your HTML and, well, just your HTML. There are other CSS attributes that it can use within it.
Yeah, I mean, think of DOM as the standard of what the websites are looking for, the web pages and the everything. You've got to use those features and functionality in your code so that because a lot of it, if you try to get it validated, doing a validation on your page, it won't validate on some of the old code anymore. So you've got to start utilizing some of the DOM elements and documents, etc.
Yeah, that website I was talking about that I do for my mom, when I can't even, my brain can't handle validating it because it's hundreds of errors because of the WordPress plugins that it's using, and that they're not using things efficiently.
Well, it's interesting. I found some of the elements that I thought were just really pretty easy to use in the past. They're outdated now. They said no, it won't work anymore. You can still use it, but you won't validate your page anymore with it. Yeah. And so there are things that are being discarded along the wayside that says no, you got to use the updated standards and functionality. Yeah.
DOM is just a way for JavaScript to interact with the HTML. That's all you really need to think of it. It's JavaScript's API to the HTML world, basically.
So,
that
I get a question for everybody then. I noticed, Tiffany, you're using PHP a little bit still in your code.
Yeah. That's just I took from my 230 class, everything I'd done there, and I just hooked the same. I changed like the navigation and stuff, but I didn't feel like going through and rewriting all the CSS, but my brain can't handle a super white bare bones. Like you've got is fine, but I just was like, I've already got this built. I'm just going to use it in my pages. So
the question I have for everybody is, when you use JavaScript, in PHP, I noticed like your header and your footer, it was, you're calling that file, right? Because, so you
Which you can do with JavaScript too.
You can do it in JavaScript, but is that what you do all the time? Does anybody know? I haven't used it enough to know.
So with the PHP, like I've got there with the includes, what that does is, like you were talking about, Mark, modularizing,
Yep.
You know, so that you don't have to go through and do it, you know, a ton of upkeep. I know it has other uses also. You can write PHP code that will pull, you know, timestamps and that kind of thing. I haven't got into it too much at this point.
So
I just use it for modularizing.
I mean, from what I'm seeing is like when I go on to create a new page, you know, new web page, I don't have PHP as an option in NetBeans. It's only.
Oh yeah, you do.
No,
so you do. Yeah. Let me. Well, you may have to.
It's probably the one that you downloaded, like you.
Yeah. Let me share my screen here again. So right here, if I want to do a new, let me close this up here, a new page, if I right click on my 261 here, I can do new. So you don't have PHP file right there?
Nope.
Okay, so it's like you said, it's going to have to do with the book version. I have everything because I'm using, like I downloaded the version that has
I went through
Java
and downloaded the one that
I had it before though. That's what's really weird is I don't see it anymore for some reason.
Oh, you had it at one point?
If you go into tools, there is a way to add
Is that where it is?
specific plugins. And you can
Yeah, so
download
it's
the PHP plugin.
Yeah. Where is that at? I knew I had found it from in here too. Or is it from here or is it in the actual plugins thing?
It's in the actual plugins. That's how you download and manage all the plugins that go into NetBeans.
Yeah, so these all in here.
The question is, do I really want to? I mean, can you do pretty much everything?
Well, have you done 230, CIT 230 at all?
Yeah, I mean, it's...
Okay, because that's what I had, you know, I had done that one. I was doing that at the same time as the 260, so when instead of just downloading the one that was for just the PHP or just the Java, I went ahead and downloaded the one that has absolutely everything because I thought, you know, whatever, it doesn't take up that much more room. Yeah. So that may be, you know, the easiest way to go about. So then, you know, you can see which ones you have installed here. And so you may go in there and check. It may just be as easy as going in and finding the PHP plugin, checking it, and then telling it to install. So
does anybody see a reason to use that? I mean, do you still, with JavaScript seems to be pretty powerful. Are you better off blending that with HTML and CSS, or do all four really work together well? I
like it because of, you know, as I'm adding pages, all I have to do is open up my nav file and add another thing to my navigation, to my menu. I don't have to go into each one of the pages I already have and do it. So because when when you hook this, as long as you're using that code right there, you're pulling the same file.
Right, right.
So I like it for that reason. I haven't really gotten into doing anything that's like actual PHP code, you know, just within that file.
So has anyone used JavaScript to do that replacing of that to include very much?
So
this include right here?
Yeah, because you're including those from a PHP perspective, so you're creating a modular system, which is really the way it should be done. But has anybody used JavaScript enough to be able to eliminate a PHP call like that where you can use JavaScript entirely? Or that's what I'm just trying to figure out.
So use JavaScript to modularize your site, you mean?
Yeah, yeah.
So just to give you guys an idea, the 336 class, if you guys want to take a look at my screen, this was my application that I created within if you guys ever want to mess with it, you can just go to my website and it has my CIT 336 application. What PHP is utilized for is not just for modularity, but it allows you to do very powerful server-side communication and changes. So you can update a database on a remote server. You can do code execution on a remote server to do specific tasks. So in this instance, like in this code here, this was my controller class to be able to do multiple functions, from validating data on the server side to make sure that they weren't trying to input invalid data, which you also can validate with JavaScript, but you want to make sure that someone's not going to manipulate your language or your application. So you need to have both the JavaScript side validating it as well as your PHP side. You can also do a lot of manipulation in the sense of what you can do with the data. So you can sanitize data, so it's not it is not malicious, or it is demilitarized. I don't know what you would want to say. It's not malicious anymore. It's not. Don't think of it as just a very simple adding in modularization into your code. This is doing a lot of heavy lifting within a database or within a file system on a server. Tons of stuff. So
yeah, I forgot it does interact with MySQL and all that quite a bit.
Yeah, I'm taking that class right now, so I'm just starting to learn more about the PHP.
I just got done with Oracle. Oh my gosh. I don't want to be a DBA, by the way.
Oh, was that 225? Is that that one? Yeah, that was an intense one.
Have fun with 325. That one's easy.
325?
So.
Is there a way to get around it?
No.
I'm not taking it. I'm doing 360, I think, instead. I'm going away from the database.
I don't think, well, if you're on CIT, are you a CIT?
I'm doing a minor. I have a CIT minor.
Okay.
Is what I have. I don't have a major of it.
I was about to say,
I'm
if
a
you're
university
CIT major, you have to take it.
So. No, I'm not.
So what you might have forgotten about this, but at the beginning of before Tip's presentation, this is how I link in JavaScript code. So this Prism application does the presentation for the code on my website, and that's where you just link in that code script source and give it the location.
Now that's what I've done that where it works. So that, but what you said earlier was, I think what really was the key is the fact that, you know, PHP is really on the server side, so it's isn't there more security built into that than JavaScript? Can JavaScript be side railed by an intruder a lot easier?
Well, you can disable JavaScript on the client side, so all your scripting is not executed. Right. So basically, if you only had JavaScript as your validation for the input, and you didn't have anything on the other side to actually validate it, they could do cross-site scripting and do further damage to like a database and pull out information, very sensitive information from like authentication tables, like what my application has. It has a separate table for authentication that no one can manipulate unless they could do cross-site scripting. So, long story short, that's what PHP for. Ruby on Rails is another option that you can use to be able to do a server-side application as well. So. And I think that's what we were talking about earlier this week when I was talking about a option for what we could do as a group project, where we would do something like a Slack application for joint file share, chatting, etc. It would have a back-end PHP application on a server where everyone would log into it, and we would push data to it through Java and JSON and XHTML requests. But on the other side, it's PHP listening for those requests. So.
Yeah, next week I have JSON, so I have no idea what that is, but we'll find out.
It's just an interpreter. It's a way of translating things from JavaScript or Java in that case, whatever, into a text field. That's all it's doing.
Oh, really?
Yeah, okay. That's literally all it does. So
that's cool.
But cool. Well, does anybody have any questions or next week's agenda? We've got Tiff again, Chuck, Mark, and Jan on the topics listed here.
Tiff's going to be done pretty quick.
Yeah.
I may have planned it that way.
Really?
If you guys want,
Maybe.
I'm going to upload the video tonight. I always put the video links in here. Here's last week's. The video links will be in here, and then your times when you started will be underneath your topic.
Okay.
So,
cool. Appreciate that, actually.
Thank you.
Well, thanks everybody for coming, and hope you give me at least until tomorrow to get the video up. I'll start the upload now, but it's a now over an hour long video, so I don't know how long it'll take to upload, but
it's going to take a while. Tomorrow.
Yeah, it'll be fine.
So, cool. I will see you guys later.
All right. Sounds good.